The sun rises, whether you are ready or not. Another day begins, and before the noise, before the notifications, before the quiet pressure of the world starts whispering who you should be, there is a moment, a small, almost invisible moment, where your mind is still yours. No expectations, no comparisons, no unfinished conversations replaying in your head. Just a soft, open space between sleep and responsibility. That space is not ordinary. It is sacred territory. Most people lose it within seconds. A hand reaches for the phone. A headline injects urgency. A message pulls them into someone else's agenda. A memory from yesterday tightens the chest. And just like that, the day is no longer chosen. It is inherited. Inherited from fear, from habit, from unfinished emotion. They wake up and immediately surrender the architecture of their inner world to whatever demands them first. And they wonder why their days feel heavy, why their reactions feel automatic, why their peace feels fragile. But you are here because something in you is no longer satisfied with that pattern. Something in you senses that the morning is not just the start of a schedule, it is the foundation of identity. The first thoughts you allow are not random. They are instructions. They are blueprints. They are seeds. And whatever you plant in those first quiet minutes will grow throughout the day in ways you may not even notice until it is too late to change direction. The ancient Stoics understood this with startling clarity. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up as a philosopher in a monastery. He woke up as an emperor in a world of war, plague, betrayal, and political pressure. And yet, he wrote to himself each morning as if his greatest battle was not against external chaos, but against the drift of his own mind. He knew that happiness did not begin with circumstances. It began with discipline over thought. Epictetus, born into slavery, did not control his chains, but he controlled the meaning he assigned to them. Seneca faced exile and the constant shadow of political danger, yet he returned again and again to one practice above all others. Guard the mind, train the judgment, begin the day correctly. This video was not made for someone who wants quick motivation. It was made for someone who is tired of living on autopilot, someone who is exhausted from reacting, someone who senses that the real prison is not their schedule, their past, or other people's behavior, but the unexamined narrative running quietly inside their own head every morning. If that is you, then what we are about to do is not cosmetic. It is structural. You do not need 20 affirmations. You do not need to convince yourself of fantasies. You do not need to pretend that life is easy or that pain is pleasant. Stoicism is not about denial. It is about clarity. It is about identifying what belongs to you and what does not. It is about strengthening the one territory no one can invade without your permission. Your inner response, your interpretation, your character. And here is the truth that changes everything. Your brain listens to repetition. Modern neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity. The Stoics simply called it habit of thought. Repeat a belief often enough, and it becomes a pathway. Walk that pathway daily, and it becomes your default. What you whisper to yourself in the first minutes of the morning is not harmless background noise. It is construction work. It is wiring. It is reinforcement. It is rehearsal for how you will handle disappointment, conflict, temptation, praise, delay, and uncertainty. So the question is not whether you talk to yourself in the morning. You already do. The question is whether you are doing it consciously. When you wake up, do you immediately tell yourself that the day will be overwhelming? Do you rehearse everything that might go wrong? Do you scroll and silently compare your life to curated images of someone else's progress? Do you replay yesterday's mistake and allow it to define today's identity? Or do you pause long enough to decide who you intend to be before the world makes its demands? In the next few minutes, I am going to give you 5 Stoic words, not long paragraphs, not abstract philosophy. 5. Deliberate internal commitments. Each one rooted in Stoic wisdom. Each one designed to rewire the reflexes that have kept you stuck. These are not magic formulas. They will not change you if you say them once and forget them. But if you speak them each morning with intention, if you let them interrupt your automatic patterns, if you allow them to shape how you interpret what happens next, they will quietly rebuild the architecture of your mind. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about suppressing emotion. It is not about pretending you are unaffected by life. It is about becoming deliberate. It is about reclaiming the first moments of your day so that you are no longer a leaf blown by every headline, every message, every unexpected shift in plans. It is about becoming someone who does not need the world to calm down in order to feel stable. Before we go deeper, pause for a second. Notice your breathing. Notice the fact that right now, in this moment, you are not being pulled by anyone else's urgency. This is the same quality of stillness available to you every morning. The only difference is whether you claim it. If something in you recognizes this, if you feel that subtle pull toward taking ownership of your mornings, stay with me until the end. Do not skip ahead. Each word builds on the last. And as you listen, begin imagining tomorrow morning. Imagine waking up and choosing your first thought deliberately. Imagine setting the tone before the world can interfere. Imagine building a day from intention rather than reaction. If you are willing to experiment with that, even for 1 week, then quietly commit to it now. No grand announcement, no performance, just an internal decision. And if this resonates with you, let me know in the comments with a simple sentence. I discipline my mornings, not for applause, not for perfection, but because your inner world deserves structure, because your peace deserves protection, and because the person you are becoming begins with what you tell yourself when the sun rises and no one else is watching. Stoic words 1. I release control. There is a quiet myth that sounds noble on the surface, but slowly poisons your peace. The myth says that letting go means you do not care, that if you loosen your grip, you are weak, that if you stop trying to manage every detail, every person, every outcome, you are irresponsible or passive. Many people live under this belief for years. They equate tension with love. They equate anxiety with commitment. They equate control with strength. But look closely at what that belief is costing you. Your shoulders are tight before the day even begins. Your mind is constantly scanning for threats, delays, signs that something is not moving according to your plan. You check your phone, not because you need information, but because you need reassurance. You replay conversations trying to predict reactions. You rehearse future scenarios, trying to eliminate uncertainty. You are exhausted, not because life is impossible, but because you are trying to carry what was never yours to carry. The real cost of control is not efficiency, it is depletion. When you try to control timelines, you fight reality itself. When you try to control other people, you create quiet resentment on both sides. When you try to control outcomes, you anchor your emotional stability to variables that shift without asking for your permission. And slowly, without noticing, your peace becomes conditional. Conditional on a reply. Conditional on someone changing. Conditional on the world aligning with your internal script. Stoicism offers a reframe that is both simple and deeply uncomfortable. Control, as most people imagine it, is largely an illusion. The only things that are fully yours are your choices and your character, not the speed at which someone responds, not whether a loved one chooses health over self-destruction, not whether your career unfolds according to the timeline you drafted in your early 20s. What is yours is effort, intention, integrity, response. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. There are things within your power and things outside it. Within your power are your judgments, your actions, your decisions. Outside your power are other people's opinions, other people's behaviors, timing, chance, weather, illness, opportunity. When you blur this line, you suffer. When you honor it, you breathe. Consider the simplest modern example. You send a message to someone you care about. Minutes pass, then an hour. Your mind begins constructing stories. Maybe they are upset. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe they are losing interest. Maybe you are not important. Notice what is happening. You are not suffering because of the delayed reply. You are suffering because you are trying to control what that reply means and when it should arrive. You are demanding certainty from a situation that does not owe you immediacy. From a Stoic lens, the only thing that belongs to you in that moment is how you interpret the silence. You can choose patience or panic. You can choose to return to your work or spiral into imagined rejection. The timeline of their response is not yours. Your response to the waiting is, now consider something heavier. You love someone who is walking a path that harms them. Maybe it is addiction. Maybe it is a toxic relationship. Maybe it is self-sabotage disguised as comfort. You talk to them. You offer advice. You research solutions. You lose sleep worrying. At some point, the line between love and control blurs. You begin to feel responsible not only for your effort, but for their choices. When they do not change, you feel like you have failed. But their will is not yours. Their lessons are not yours. Their timing is not yours. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you separate effort from outcome. You can show up with compassion. You can set boundaries. You can speak truth. After that, the rest belongs to them. Trying to force transformation onto someone else is like trying to open a flower with your hands. The tighter you grip, the more damage you cause. Or look at the quiet obsession with progress. You believed you would be further by now. Further in your career. Further in your healing. Further in your relationship. You measure your life against an invisible schedule and feel behind. Every delay feels like personal failure. Every detour feels unfair. You push harder, micromanage more, compare constantly. Control becomes your coping mechanism against uncertainty. Yet time does not bend because you demand it. Opportunity does not accelerate because you are impatient. What is yours is preparation, discipline, daily action. The timing of results belongs to forces beyond your design. Seneca wrote that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Preparation is yours. Opportunity is not. When you wake up and say, I release control, you are not surrendering to chaos. You are surrendering to clarity. You are acknowledging that tension does not create better outcomes. It only creates inner instability. You are choosing to invest your energy where it has impact. In effort, in virtue, in presence. The Stoic spirit can be summarized in a single principle. Do your part. Release the rest. This is not passivity. It is precision. It is knowing exactly where your influence ends and acceptance must begin. It is acting fully without clinging desperately. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be delays. There will still be people you cannot fix and timelines you cannot rush. But when you stop fighting for control you never had, something subtle shifts. Your breathing slows. Your jaw unclenches. Your mind stops rehearsing catastrophes and starts focusing on what is actually in front of you. So carry this with you throughout the day. Not as a slogan, but as a discipline. When anxiety rises, ask yourself what part of this is truly mine. Then give your full attention to that part and let the rest fall away. Effort is mine. Outcomes are not. Stoic words. 2. Today matters most. You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, you are already somewhere else. You are in next week's meeting. You are in next month's bill. You are in next year's imagined failure. Your mind races ahead, scanning the horizon for problems that have not yet arrived. The day in front of you has not even begun, yet you are living in a future that does not exist. This feels responsible. It feels strategic. It feels like preparation. But look closely at what is happening inside your body. Your chest tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your jaw locks slightly. You feel tired before you have done anything at all. Not because today is overwhelming, but because you are trying to live 30 days in a single morning. This is the hidden cost of abandoning the present. When you project yourself constantly into what if, you drain the energy required to handle what is. You lose presence. You make decisions from anxiety instead of clarity. You react to imagined disasters instead of responding to reality. And ironically, the very future you are trying to control becomes harder to shape because your attention is divided. Consider something simple and painfully common. You have an important deadline or exam coming up in a month. You wake up and immediately think about the entire stretch of time between now and that date. Your mind runs through every possible mistake, every possible shortcoming, every catastrophic scenario. In 10 minutes, you have mentally lived through 30 days of pressure. Your nervous system does not know the difference between imagination and reality. It reacts as if everything is happening at once. The result is paralysis. You feel overwhelmed, so you procrastinate, not because you are incapable, but because you tried to carry too much at once. Or think about an argument. Someone said something that cut deeper than you expected. Instead of letting the moment pass, you replay it. In the shower, in the car, lying in bed, you reconstruct the conversation and insert better lines you wish you had said. You imagine future confrontations. You tighten around it. Hours pass, then a full night, and your body remains in a subtle state of defense. The past is over, but you are still living inside it. Today quietly slips away while you wrestle with yesterday. Even something as small as standing in front of a mirror can turn into a full day of self-judgment. You notice one detail about your appearance that does not meet your internal standard. In 10 minutes, you build an entire narrative about inadequacy. You carry that story into work, into conversations, into silence. The external world has not changed, but your interpretation has colored everything. All because you left the present moment and entered a mental courtroom where you are both prosecutor and accused. Stoicism cuts directly into this pattern with a sharp and liberating insight. Agency exists only in the present. The past cannot be altered. The future cannot be grasped. The only place where your power operates is here, now, in the next decision. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself repeatedly to confine himself to the present, not because the future did not matter, but because anxiety feeds on abstraction. When you narrow your focus to this moment, you remove the oxygen from fear. Present is where agency lives, not in rehearsed arguments, not in imagined timelines, not in mental simulations of success or disaster. In this breath, in this step, in this action, when you tell yourself each morning that today matters most, you are not dismissing long-term goals. You are refusing to mortgage your peace in advance. You are choosing to meet life in manageable pieces. The future will arrive one day at a time. There is no advantage in trying to drag it forward prematurely. So, how do you anchor yourself in the present when your mind has been trained for years to wander? Begin with something small and deliberate, a 60 to 90-second ritual before you engage with anything external. Sit up in bed or stand still for a moment. Take one slow, conscious breath. Not dramatic, not forced, just intentional. Feel the air move in and out. Then ask yourself one question. What is the next right action? Not what will happen this month. Not what could go wrong this year. Just the next right action. Maybe it is drinking a glass of water. Maybe it is making your bed with care instead of rushing. Maybe it is sending a kind message you have been postponing. Maybe it is sitting down for 15 focused minutes on the task that actually moves your life forward. One honorable action, one small act of order, that is enough. When you act in the present, something subtle shifts. Anxiety loses its grip because it cannot survive without future projection. Regret softens because you are no longer feeding it with replay. You begin to feel solid again, not because life is simple, but because your attention is disciplined. Today matters most. Does not mean ignore tomorrow. It means build tomorrow correctly by honoring today. It means recognizing that this day, this specific collection of hours, will never return. It is not rehearsal. It is not a waiting room for some better future version of your life. It is your life. And if you can master one day at a time, if you can return again and again to the next right action, you will discover something profound. The future you were so anxious about is shaped quietly, steadily, by how fully you inhabit the present. Today matters most, not in theory, not as a slogan, but as a daily discipline of attention. Stoic words. 3. I choose my response. Before we go any further, test yourself honestly. If this morning you were triggered, not in theory but in reality, how would you usually respond? Would you explode, letting frustration spill out before you have even understood it? Would you go silent but carry a quiet bitterness that poisons the rest of your interactions? Or would you turn inward and blame yourself, assuming immediately that you are the problem? Most people do not choose their response. They inherit it. It was shaped by habit, by past wounds, by environments where reacting quickly felt necessary. The reaction feels automatic, almost justified. But Stoicism begins with a radical claim. There is a space between what happens and what you do next. And that space, however brief, is where your power lives. Let us make this practical. Scene 1. Your phone vibrates. A message from your boss or teacher appears. Need this, now. No greeting, no context, just urgency. Instantly, your body tightens. Your mind interprets the tone as pressure or criticism. You feel either defensive or panicked. Perhaps you think they do not respect your time. Perhaps you think you are already behind. Within seconds, your mood shifts. The rest of your morning bends around that one notification. Scene 2. You are in a group chat. Someone makes a joke at your expense. It is subtle enough to pass as humor, but sharp enough to sting. You feel heat in your chest. You consider firing back with something cutting. Or you withdraw and decide not to engage anymore. The story builds quickly. They do not take me seriously. They are always like this. I have to defend myself. Scene 3. You make a small mistake. You send an email with a typo. You forget an appointment. You stumble over words in a presentation. No one else reacts dramatically. But inside, you launch an attack. How could I be so careless? I always mess things up. I am not disciplined enough. In a matter of seconds, a minor error becomes evidence in a larger trial against your worth. In each of these moments, something predictable happens beneath the surface. The Stoics described it clearly long before modern psychology mapped it out. First comes the impression, an event occurs, a message arrives, a joke is made, a mistake happens. Then comes judgment. You assign meaning to the impression. This is disrespect. This is failure. This is proof I am not good enough. That judgment produces emotion, anger, anxiety, shame, and that emotion drives action. You snap, you withdraw, you overwork, you self-criticize. Impression leads to judgment. Judgment leads to emotion. Emotion leads to action. Notice what is missing from that chain when you live unconsciously. There is no deliberate choice. The process feels instantaneous, but it is not. It is simply fast, and fast can be slowed. Your power is not in controlling impressions. You cannot stop urgent messages from arriving. You cannot prevent people from speaking carelessly. You cannot guarantee perfection in everything you do. Your power is in examining the judgment before it hardens into emotion. This is where the Stoic discipline begins. The pause. When you wake up and say, "I choose my response," you are committing to interrupting that chain, not suppressing emotion, not pretending you do not feel it, but inserting awareness between impression and judgment. To make this real, practice it deliberately for 7 days. On day 1 and 2, focus only on learning the pause. When triggered, take 3 slow breaths before speaking or typing. Not dramatic breathing, just enough to create distance. Those 3 breaths are not weakness. They are strength in motion. They are you refusing to let speed dictate character. On day 3 and 4, add language. When something hits you, quietly say to yourself, "This is just an impression, not a fact, not a final truth, just an impression." That sentence alone loosens the grip of automatic judgment. It reminds you that what you are experiencing is filtered through interpretation. On day 5, 6, and 7, go further. After the pause and the naming, choose a virtue. Ask yourself, which quality would I rather express right now? Patience, courage, justice, temperance. If the urgent message triggered panic, patience steadies you. If the group chat joke triggered anger, temperance restrains excess. If your mistake triggered shame, courage allows you to acknowledge it calmly and move forward. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming deliberate. The difference between a reactive life and a disciplined one is not the absence of triggers. It is the presence of awareness. Imagine responding to that urgent message with clarity instead of panic. Imagine answering the joke with calm humor or dignified silence instead of bitterness. Imagine correcting your mistake without attacking your own identity. The external events are identical. The internal outcome is entirely different. "I choose my response" is not a slogan. It is a practice. It is a daily training of perception. Every time you pause, you strengthen the pathway that leads from impression to chosen action rather than reflex. Over time, the pause becomes natural, the judgment softens, the emotion stabilizes, and your character becomes less dependent on circumstances. You cannot control the impressions that arrive today, but you can choose what they become inside you. And that choice, repeated consistently, is the quiet foundation of inner freedom. Stoic words 4. Growth lives here. The Stoics carried a principle that sounds simple but demands courage to live. Amor fati, love your fate, not tolerate it, not endure it with clenched teeth. Love it. This does not mean celebrating suffering or pretending hardship is pleasant. It means refusing to run from the exact conditions life places in front of you. It means seeing every difficulty as material for character, not as interruption, but as instruction. Most people misunderstand growth. They imagine it as something that feels inspiring, clean, motivating, but real growth rarely announces itself that way. It arrives disguised as awkwardness, fear, embarrassment, uncertainty. It feels like friction, and the instinctive reaction is to escape. The old version of you avoided discomfort whenever possible. If something felt unfamiliar, you stepped back. If you looked foolish, you quit early. If your heart raced before a difficult conversation, you convinced yourself it was not worth it. Comfort became the silent priority. You told yourself you were being practical, realistic, careful, but underneath that reasoning was a simple desire to avoid feeling exposed. The new version of you does something different. The new version does not chase discomfort for drama. It does not romanticize pain. It simply stays. Stays long enough to understand that discomfort is not a signal of danger, but of expansion. Stays long enough to notice that the very edge of your capability is where strength begins forming. Imagine learning a new skill. Perhaps a language, an instrument, a professional craft that stretches you beyond what feels natural. The first attempts are clumsy. You forget words. Your hands do not cooperate. You feel slow. You feel behind. A voice inside whispers that this is not for you, that you should return to what you are already good at. It feels safer there. You avoid the humiliation of being a beginner. The old you listens to that voice. You quit quietly. You protect your ego. And weeks later, nothing has changed. The new you pauses and recognizes something important. That feeling of incompetence is not proof of inadequacy. It is evidence of neural pathways forming. It is the sensation of growth under construction. Virtue is trained, not wished for. Skill is practiced, not imagined. Confidence is built, not declared. Or consider something more emotional. You decide to set a boundary for the first time in a relationship that has quietly drained you. Your heart pounds before you speak. Your palms sweat. Your mind generates worst-case scenarios. They will be upset. They will reject you. You will lose connection. The fear is intense, almost disproportionate. The old you interprets that fear as a warning. This is dangerous. Avoid it. Keep the peace. Stay agreeable. The new you interprets the same fear differently. This is growth. This is the nervous system adjusting to a new pattern. For years, you may have been conditioned to prioritize comfort over honesty. Of course, it feels unnatural to change. But unnatural does not mean wrong. It means new. Or perhaps you are practicing something as small yet powerful as saying no. No to an invitation that exhausts you. No to a task that overloads you. No to a request that compromises your values. Immediately, guilt rises. You feel selfish. You feel like you are disappointing someone. The discomfort is sharp. The old you retracts the no and replaces it with a reluctant yes. You sacrifice your time and energy to avoid temporary unease. The new you stays with the guilt, not in a dramatic way, just calmly. You let the feeling exist without letting it dictate your decision. You understand that growth often feels like breaking a long-standing pattern, and breaking patterns is uncomfortable by nature. Seneca wrote that difficulty strengthens the mind as labor strengthens the body. When you lift a weight for the first time, your muscles resist. They tremble. They burn. But that burning is not damage. It is adaptation. Emotional and moral growth follow the same law. When you practice courage, it feels shaky. When you practice honesty, it feels risky. When you practice restraint, it feels unnatural. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes stable. Amor fati does not ask you to enjoy every hardship. It asks you to stop viewing hardship as a mistake. The obstacle is not evidence that you are on the wrong path. Often, it is the path itself. The difficult conversation is the lesson. The awkward beginning is the training. The moment of fear is the threshold. Growth lives here. Not in the fantasy of who you might become one day, but in the uncomfortable action you are avoiding right now. This does not mean pushing yourself recklessly. It means distinguishing between true danger and temporary discomfort. True danger threatens your safety or integrity. Discomfort threatens your ego. Most of what we avoid falls into the second category. When you feel that tightening in your chest before trying something new, remind yourself that discomfort is not danger. It is training. It is your character being stretched into a wider shape. If you retreat every time you feel resistance, you remain unchanged. If you stay, you transform. So the action is simple but demanding. The next time discomfort appears, do not ask how to eliminate it immediately. Ask what it is teaching. Ask which virtue it is inviting you to practice. Courage, patience, discipline, self-respect. Growth lives here, not beyond the fear, not after the awkward phase, not when everything feels smooth. In the friction, in the effort, in the moment where you decide not to run, discomfort is not danger, it is training. Stoic words 5. I am enough. When I achieve X, then I can breathe. When I earn more, then I can relax. When they finally choose me, then I will feel secure. When I fix this flaw, then I will be worthy of love. This is the quiet dialogue that runs beneath ambition, beneath discipline, beneath self-improvement. It sounds productive. It sounds driven, but if you listen carefully, it carries a dangerous assumption. It assumes that your worth is postponed, that it is waiting somewhere in the future, attached to an outcome. The mechanism behind this belief is subtle but relentless. When your sense of worth depends on external validation, it becomes permanently unstable. External conditions shift. Applause fades. People change their minds. Success raises the standard instead of satisfying it. If your value rises and falls with performance, then peace is always temporary. You may feel confident for a moment, but the next comparison, the next criticism, the next unmet expectation destabilizes you again. This is why so many high achievers feel quietly insecure. The goal is reached, but the relief does not last. The mind immediately searches for the next benchmark. The finish line moves. The breath you promised yourself never fully arrives. Look at how this plays out in ordinary life. If they do not choose me, that must mean I am not enough. A relationship ends or does not begin. And instead of seeing it as incompatibility or timing, you interpret it as proof of deficiency. You measure your value against someone else's decision, but their choice is influenced by their fears, their history, their preferences. It is not a verdict on your character. Yet when worth is externalized, every rejection feels like exposure. Or consider perfection. If I am not flawless, I am not lovable. You scrutinize your work, your body, your words. One small mistake becomes evidence of being fundamentally inadequate. You cannot accept affection unless you believe you have earned it through performance. The pressure to be impeccable becomes exhausting. There is no room for humanity, no room for learning, no room for error. Then there is the guilt around rest. If I slow down, I am lazy. If I take a break, I am falling behind. You equate constant productivity with value. The moment you pause, a quiet accusation arises. You are not doing enough. You are not being enough. Rest becomes something that must be justified rather than something that sustains you. All of these traps share one foundation. They tie your worth to applause, achievement, comparison, or output. And because those variables are never fully within your control, your sense of self becomes fragile. The Stoics approached worth differently. They located it in character, not in reputation, not in wealth, not in admiration, in character, in your capacity to act with reason, integrity, courage, and moderation. These qualities are internal, they are trained, they are chosen, and most importantly, they are available to you regardless of circumstance. Enough does not mean perfect. It does not mean superior. It does not mean finished. It means sufficient to live in alignment with virtue, sufficient to act justly, sufficient to speak truthfully, sufficient to endure difficulty with dignity. Your value is not the sum of your achievements. It is reflected in how you conduct yourself when achievement is uncertain. When you say, "I am enough," you are not declaring that there is nothing to improve. Growth remains essential. Discipline remains important, but you are separating growth from worth. You can strive without condemning yourself. You can aim higher without believing you are currently deficient as a human being. This shift changes how you interpret everyday events. If someone does not choose you, you can feel disappointment without converting it into self-rejection. If you make a mistake, you can correct it without attacking your identity. If you rest, you can recognize that restoration supports virtue rather than undermines it. The inner critic may still speak. It may tell you that you should be further ahead, more attractive, more successful. Stoicism does not require you to silence that voice completely. It asks you not to obey it blindly. You can hear the thought and then measure it against a higher standard. Does this thought help me act with virtue today, or does it merely fuel insecurity? To make this practical, anchor it in a small morning ritual. Before engaging with the world, place your hand lightly on your chest. Feel the steadiness of your breathing. This simple gesture grounds you in your body rather than in comparison. Then say quietly, "I am enough to act with virtue today." Notice the wording. Not enough to impress everyone. Not enough to be flawless. Enough to act with virtue. Enough to respond with patience. Enough to practice courage. Enough to choose honesty. Enough to show restraint. This reframes the entire day. Your mission is no longer to prove your worth. It is to express your character. External results may vary. Praise may come or not. Progress may be visible or subtle, but your value is not suspended until applause arrives. When worth is rooted internally, effort becomes lighter. You still strive. You still improve. But you are no longer running from a sense of inadequacy. You are moving from a place of wholeness. I am enough is not complacency. It is stability. It is the foundation from which meaningful growth becomes possible. Without it, you chase validation endlessly. With it, you can build quietly, consistently, without fear that a single setback will erase your identity. So tomorrow morning, before you measure yourself against anything external, ground yourself, hand on chest, one steady breath. I am enough to act with virtue today. Let that be the standard. Let that be the measure. Let that be the quiet confidence you carry into whatever the day brings. 5 words. 5 internal commitments. Not scattered affirmations, but structural beams. When practiced together, they stop being phrases and start becoming architecture. I release, control clears the ground. It removes the illusion that you can force life into obedience. It frees your energy from chasing outcomes and returns it to effort and character. Without this first shift, everything else collapses under anxiety. Today Matters Most lays the foundation. It pulls your attention out of imaginary futures and unresolved pasts and anchors it in the only place where action is possible. Agency does not live in projection. It lives in the present breath, the present decision, the present step. I choose. My response builds the walls. It defines the space between stimulus and action. It interrupts the automatic chain from impression to judgment to emotion to reaction. It transforms you from someone who is pushed around by circumstance into someone who stands deliberate inside it. Growth lives here raises the ceiling. It reframes discomfort from threat to training. It teaches you to remain steady in the stretch, to see difficulty as the forge of virtue rather than evidence of inadequacy. Without this, you retreat the moment friction appears. With it, you expand. I am enough stabilizes the interior. It removes the constant need for applause as structural support. When your worth is anchored in virtue rather than validation, you stop building your life on shifting approval. You stand upright because your character holds you, not because others confirm you. Together, these 5 words form an inner architecture that does not depend on perfect conditions. They do not eliminate hardship. They eliminate helplessness. They do not guarantee comfort. They guarantee clarity. The Stoics did not design their philosophy for calm seasons. They forged it in exile, in war, in uncertainty. What they left behind is not a motivational script. It is a framework for psychological sovereignty. Rebirth, in the Stoic sense, is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not announced to the world. It happens quietly in the discipline of mornings, when you wake up and choose your internal posture before the world chooses it for you. When you train your mind to return to effort, to presence, to response, to growth, to worth rooted in virtue. Over time, this repetition reshapes you. The anxious mind softens. The reactive impulse slows. The craving for validation loosens. You become someone who does not need everything to align in order to feel steady. Not because life is easier, but because your structure is stronger. 5 words. 1. Architecture. Built daily, reinforced in silence, and lived in action. Now, pause for a moment. Do not rush away from this. Let the ideas settle. You have just walked through 5 internal commitments that, if practiced consistently, can change the quality of your days without changing your circumstances. Notice what resonated most. Was it the release of control, the return to the present, the discipline of response, the embrace of discomfort, the reclaiming of worth? You do not need to master all 5 perfectly tomorrow. Stoicism is not about perfection. It is about practice. Tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, before you step into conversation, before the world begins assigning roles and expectations, sit with yourself for a minute. 1 breath, 1 grounded posture. Speak the words slowly, not as performance, not as a ritual for anyone else to see, but as instruction to your own mind. If you forget during the day, begin again. If you react instead of respond, learn from it. If discomfort overwhelms you, return to the principle. If doubt about your worth rises, remember where value truly resides. Each moment is another chance to rebuild correctly. This is what Stoic rebirth looks like. It is not dramatic reinvention. It is daily alignment. It is choosing character over chaos, presence over projection, growth over avoidance, effort over outcome, virtue over applause. You are not powerless in your life, but your power is precise. It exists in how you think, how you judge, how you act. The world may remain unpredictable. People may remain inconsistent. Timelines may remain uncertain. Yet your internal stance can become steady. If this message resonates with you, leave a simple commitment in the comments. I build my inner architecture daily, not for motivation, but for mastery. Not to impress, but to live deliberately. And tomorrow, when the sun rises and that quiet, sacred moment appears before the noise, remember that your mind is listening. What you tell it will shape what follows. Choose carefully, choose consciously, and begin again.